Executive Outlook. Today, we are joined by Thomas Rosendahl, a seasoned leader in product and technology with a proven track of shaping digital services that drive real business. With experience spanning around product portfolio, leadership, UX, engineering, and advanced analytics, Thomas has successfully guided organizations through transformation. Welcome, Thomas.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
So, I'm very excited to know about your journey and how you started and how you are here as a CTO.
Yes. Well, I guess my journey is probably more or less traditional than most CTOs since I started out in human factors and user experience design. But I think I quickly found that if you really want to transform things, you need to understand more disciplines. So I work closely with engineers and project management to figure out how do we actually get stuff building. And then as technology progressed, more opportunities arised, and of course the mobile phone back in the days. It just gave another perspective on how we use technology. And I think I found myself at that intersection of technological capabilities, business understanding, and then an interest for human habit. And I think that's been my journey towards the CTO because a lot of what it takes to transform companies is the commercial understanding or the business understanding, the understanding of the customers, and not just what does the perfect technology look like. That's my journey to CTO. I know a little bit of coding, but not as technical as most.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So, CEOs are mostly business oriented, CTOs are mostly tech oriented. But how
Mhm.
do you bridge that gap? How you explain to the CEO that tech is business?
I think for companies to make this happen, where you marry sort of the technological capability and the business understanding of human habit to get the most interesting results or business results, is for companies to traverse a maturity curve, which in a simplified trajectory could look something like you have group IT, which is more tell me what to do mindset, right? You have a set of requirements, go carry it out. Nobody's really happy with the result, or move along the trajectory to become what I would call a modern tech department or division, which is very much focused on the technology side, on, for instance, cloud and microservices, new languages, new technologies, how you implement that. But it's also on the execution part, right? So more agile ways of working. Maybe you establish a platform team that you actually sort of move on to become a modern tech organization. And you present, whenever you interact with the rest of the business, you present different options, but they're from a technological standpoint, right? So you give the trade-offs of choosing one tech version over another. And then I would say the final step, again, this is very simplified, is, okay, tech is business. We in tech and the rest of the organization understand the value of tech in a very quantifiable manner or monetizable manner. We either have, you could say, practices, a service, or products that we can actually monetize. And I think a simple example could be, I was at Nordic, a white goods supplier. And one of the things about delivering white goods or any, say, heavier material where you need to enter people's homes is, well, then delivery kind of matters. So taking a simple delivery calendar, which is basically book a time slot, a date and a time slot, and your package will arrive, to, okay, people have different needs. You're actually interfering with their everyday life. They might need to take time off work. Okay, maybe it's worth something for them to be able to schedule exactly when they need to be at home. You're taking a cue from airlines and hotels booking, right? So you have a dynamic pricing all of a sudden. And I think that was one way of taking a very simple tool and then turning it into a commercial tool and driver. And then for the actual question, how do you then convince the CEO of a company? And I think if you're a software company, well, it probably goes without saying, right? Tech is your business. Or like it happened a few years ago, where every company wanted to be a tech company, then you could ride that wave. If you're not in that position, again, this is very simplified, you basically have two options. One would be perhaps the more classic way of efficiency and cost out potential through automation, which should never be overlooked, because you could say that's just a fundamental right to play, yet it is more of a defensive move where business development is usually more offensive. I mean, agentic AI might give more promise to pursue this avenue. We'll get back to that because there are other issues with that. So that's the more classical approach. And I think you should always make sure that you cover that base because that is your right to play to start discussing the second avenue, which is almost, I would say, never an easy feat since it means the more of a transformation of how most companies work together in around business development. And you could say it's a two-string approach where the ultimate goal, the way I see it, would be to actually make money from a digital product or service in itself. I know a lot of companies have tried to become product companies as well, and they find out it's really hard. So perhaps the sweet spot is to find something that has both the potential to become a standalone product or service, and at the same time, it solves an immediate or at least acknowledged business pain point. And if you have to choose between those two, always go with the latter, I would say, because that's where you have the path of least resistance. And then if you get this far, then there's still the thing about, okay, you need to commit resources, and resources are almost always scarce. And do we really want to commit? What I've experienced works fairly well is to set it up as an experiment with an expiry date, because what that does is that it allows for control along the way, and it puts a financial cap on the resource spend. So you have your guardrails in place that it's not going to be another, okay, some fancy tech thing that just went along and kept going and going. The other crucial point is to agree what does success actually look like. And it should be tied to proper business value. So not something about, okay, if we do this, then we have 100 developers who will be 2 minutes more effective. I mean, that's not really business development. That's just back to, of course, you should be more efficient, right? So it should be tied more to ideally revenue or bottom line. And then it should be set up as a cross-functional collab with one or more business units to ensure that it doesn't become a tech thing, because that in itself can be a roadblock, really, that, okay, can tech really figure out business? Maybe not on its own. And that's why it's so important to get a cross-functional collaboration.
All right. So, as a CTO, if you want to bring other stakeholders, on board, so how you will gonna build your team and how you will gonna have them?
You need to have them on board, or unless you have like just the way of convincing the CEO. But I think no matter what, you want to succeed in this becoming a sustainable or lasting transformation. So you need to get support from other stakeholders. And this is rarely something that happens overnight, and it takes some work. And one way is that in most, if not all organizations, there's always a resource shortage, especially around tech resources. So the promise could be, all right, for an extended period of time, you actually have dedicated resources, so to speak. And if you pair that with significant problem or opportunity that matters to the business unit, that's probably the best fit. And again, you bring in the time-bound factor of an experiment. So, okay, we want to do this. Anybody saying, yes, our collaboration between tech and the business units are just optimal. We don't need to change a thing. So almost always people are interested for this to work better. And then you have the opportunity to say, okay, let's do that. Let's embed some of your knowledge and expertise, which is really what makes the product great, in a cross-functional team. So that's also, make sure that they then commit by resources, commit to give feedback along the way, and again, also commit on a joint objective that's achievable within the time frame. And now I mentioned this calendar thing before, and I think that's probably a very simple example of what it takes to transform a mindset. And it probably took, I would say, 6 months, but there was transparency around results, but it was also because it was not a tech thing. It was not a distribution thing. It was a joint effort. So you were committed into trying it out. And I think that the whole point is this: trying it out and then capping the period, because then people say, okay, yeah, I can spend 3 months trying to figure this one out because the problem actually matters to me.
As a tech leader, how do you identify the initiatives within an organization that can be solved with the help of technology?
If you really want to have tech as business and not just say it in the tech department because you feel you get overlooked, then there's a definite, I would say, requirement, really, a need to better understand business. What is the flow of the business? Where do we make money? What is the most important thing? Otherwise, we cannot help make it more effective. And we also need to understand the role of the system or an application that it plays to actually help the job of enterprise architects or architects in general is always one of trade-offs. And it might be a technological trade-off. It might also be a time constraint, money constraint, or it might be that, okay, you think that this is the best architecture to what we already have, but we're looking for an M&A. So actually our architecture needs to be optimized towards M&A instead. And that might mean that we choose SAP or some other ERP that we wouldn't have chosen otherwise, but it just makes us more, you could say, easily integratable with in case of an M&A. And that's another perspective, right? So you need to understand these trade-offs within the tech department. Otherwise, you cannot change it. You cannot become business, right? Also understand, again, a simple example. CRM, well, in B2B and B2C, two different things, right? In B2C, it might just mean, okay, I just want to personalize my email messages or my on-site or my shop. Whereas in B2B, it's, okay, I want to keep the log of what offers have I given him, what were the emails and so forth. It's just two different perspectives. Whereas if you look at it from a purely system perspective, you might just say, okay, this architectural overview, okay, I just need a CRM, but it's two different business applications. And that probably also speaks to another change within tech itself. If you really want this, then you need to be proactive. It's no longer, okay, somebody else will tell me what to do. No, you need to sort of dig in and participate in discussions that are not purely technical. And you cannot just say, okay, I went along with my estimate, deliver on time. And in this, if you want to be business, you might deliver on time, but still fail. And that's a mind shift change for a lot of people in tech because they're not used to be measured on that, on the actual outcome.
So there are a lot of tools that are available in the market. So how do you identify which tool is needed for your initiatives?
Yes, so I think if you go back to what tech as business or tech as business development, a lot of it is about hedging risk, right? So it's acknowledging that you don't know and you cannot know everything upfront, but you still want to hedge risk and you want the agility to take those risks without everything blowing up. And there's definitely some tooling need for that to happen, but also processes. So one would be, for instance, branch management and feature toggling with tools, and it might be, front end on Vercel or Split.io. I would say tools like that would be critical to run experiments in a rigorous manner and at the same time mitigate the risks with easy rollback or redirection. Because this is also a game of, you could call it rapid prototyping or rapid spiking. And that might mean you put in more duct tape because you don't want to do everything until you know it actually has the business value that you're looking for. And that's where tools to support, for instance, developer experience come in. And that might be, in a simple way, boilerplates, or it might be automated pipelines to remove the cognitive load from developers and mitigate the trivial mistake. And then since you are taking risks and you're experimenting, which means that, okay, something, especially if you're working in a legacy ecosystem where you have something that's new, moved to the cloud, something that's old, which is a lot of companies, then monitoring and alerting both at the team level, but also at a central level becomes critical capabilities. So you don't risk these major disruptions to running business, right? And that might be, you could use Datadog, you could use something else, but the practice of monitoring and alerting, because on the one hand, we accept the risk in this way of approaching it, but on the other hand, causing serious issues for current running business doesn't exactly get you more backers. And one roadblock that I think most good ideas of business development projects run into, because these days I don't think you really can do business development without tech being involved. That is the data availability, especially from legacy systems. And it's usually a huge endeavor to remake the data model or make that data available. And then how you have the whole flow of data back and forth. And I think for this approach, since you don't want to do everything until you know what works, then using a middle layer for data orchestration that allows you to test different things in the customer experience, the user experience. And then you find out, okay, actually, if I pair this data in this way, then I'm able to do X. And of course, you would like to have that data flow back so you can start building machine learning experiences, other stuff. But to begin with, you just want to find out, okay, there's actually a potential. So a middle layer for data orchestration to run these experiments. And there are actually a number of them, but one would be Enterspeed, for instance. It's a smaller company, but depending on the size of the company, that way of being able to have a middle layer for data orchestration, that's to me also an essential thing, especially if you have a lot of front-end heavy experiments.
All right. So, can you share some of the case studies which you have solved as a part of tech initiatives and which has created the real business impact?
If we are to talk about a transformation, which is probably a more longer lasting impact, because there have been like smaller things where you optimized profitability or you optimized conversions or you optimized the customer experience or you took down the return flow and so on and so forth. But I think to me, where you actually integrate it into the business is when you take part of your operating model and have it powered by tech. And I would say you're coming up upon, you have Gen AI, but before Gen AI, I've been working with machine learning for a while, and it was really hard to get people to understand the promise of it. But then you had ChatGPT coming out, and then you just rebranded it to AI, and all of a sudden, okay, this sounds interesting, right? So I think to me, taking part of your operating model and automating that through machine learning, AI is crucial. And one example would be if you're an e-commerce company, then a lot of your business evolves, or your operating model evolves around pricing and campaigning. And it happens like regularly, like every 4 weeks or so, depending on where you are. You have the same flow or tasks that needs to be executed. So what we actually did was we knew we had a pricing issue, that it was too manual. So we probably needed some kind of pricing engine that could help automate stuff. But it also entailed new processes in our commercial department. We sat together and said, okay, we have this issue. Should we not make a joint team to make sure we get it right in the first place? And this is an example of finding a pain point where you actually, okay, we have different sides of the problem, but we have the same problem. And it actually started out as, okay, we need to get this pricing tool efficiency in place. But then it kind of went on with this experience or this classification of data we do through this project. Then we have the next activity, which is around campaigning and pricing on campaigns. Okay, that's a lot of work where if you're in a category that there's a lot of transparency, a lot of price competition, then it's also market driven. So it should be a case to automate through machine learning or AI if you want. And this is actually what we then set out to do, that this progress or process of pricing on campaign, how do we automate that? And at first it was a tool, a supporting tool for the category managers. Okay, we have price suggestions for you. So you don't have to worry about everything, but you can focus on a smaller number of goods instead of everything. And one of sort of the levers to actually get this through was we could show a number of products that last 5 times they've been on campaign, they've been set at the same price, but they sold exactly zero. And then you would probably say, okay, a machine cannot do worse than that, right? And that was sort of a ticket to play and say, okay, let's play along with this. And then working again in a cross-functional team with lots of transparency, lots of feedback, not saying, oh, the model knows best, but more, okay, the model has suggestions and you have business expertise and market expertise. How do we calibrate that with the end goal of automating as much as we possibly can? And the cool thing was that this ended up actually, I think it was around 70% of our campaign or goods on campaign, that pricing could be automated through machine learning. That's taking a major part of an operating model and actually automating that through technology.
That's a very interesting use case. I think this is the way we can bring technology to solve the issues that we are facing in the business. Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, so can you tell me some of the challenges that you have got while you are working on your projects?
So one is the way of working. There's not a lot of organizations who do that every day. That's definitely one obstacle. But again, coming back to if you can show the results, get them to commit to a time-bound experiment and show the results, then that obstacle becomes less. Of course, if the results aren't there, okay, then you should scrap it, right? You shouldn't just insist on doing it if the results aren't there. But I think the main challenge is probably when you touch upon what people are used to every day. When you go actually and influence major parts of their daily jobs. So for instance, this thing about the automatic pricing, okay, there were definitely different opinions on whether this was a good idea or not. And it was probably 50-50. But then you start working, okay, let's then do the least dangerous part first, which is, okay, this is a support and you get to focus where you can actually use your expertise. And I think that is, to me, the main obstacle. It used to be that it was hard to explain why machine learning and technology was important, but I think everybody knows it's important. Now it's about how do you then figure out how to show the results. I think I've also tried to, for instance, we did something where we could prove that we could improve the bottom line by preventing returns. But it was the rollout then was dependent on the people working with that every day, and they were not involved in the project. So that failed. The rollout failed. So I think really pay attention to the people and the people's jobs and tasks that you're affecting and have them on board and give back along the way. So maybe you could just figure it out on your own. I would say if you think that, maybe just try the other way anyway, right? Because you might have the perfect product. If it's not used, does it matter then? So that's to me the main obstacle. Getting the products adopted really and the services adopted.
It's a perfect example because it is difficult to change the culture within an organization because they're used to it doing from a long time, and suddenly there's a change, and changing the mindset and adopting the new things takes time. So that is what I have got from your understanding. Thank you so much, Thomas, for sharing your journey, insights, and how the technology driven change actually can create the business impacts. Thank you so much for sharing, and it's a pleasure having you on the executive.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.